Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to All Things Superman, where we simply talk about everything related to Superman, from movies to TV shows to comics and much, much more. All right, everyone, so this is the second week of our series where we're reviewing all of the Superman movies from Superman 1, Superman 2, Superman 3, Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, Superman Returns, on up into Man of Steel, and we're talking about how it all relates to the new Batman-Superman movie that's coming in 2016. Now, this by far is the favorite of all of the Supermans from Superman 1 through 4 from the Christopher Reeve movies. Superman 2 is by far the most popular. It's the favorite among the fans and just the average moviegoer. So this movie review is very important to the structure of how things are going to happen in the Man of Steel universe and the Batman-Superman universe. All right, so the first thing we need to dive into, and that's one of the most important things about this movie, is I don't know if everybody knows this yet, or I don't know if you know, but there's two different versions of this movie. So there's a regular movie, the regular movie that you guys saw in the theater, that we all saw in the theater, that's the most popular one that they show on TV most of the time. And then there's the Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut. Now, there's a lot of back history about why this happened, and I'll dive a little bit into that and explain to you why that happened. So Richard Dick Donner, is he was the director of Superman 1, Superman the movie. And as you may know, they were filming Superman 1 and Superman 2 simultaneously. So they were all filming at the same time. Long story short, there was some turmoil about which direction the movie should go, which direction Superman should go as a character. There was a difference between, I think, the Salkinds and Richard Donner. So they brought Richard Lester in to direct the second movie. Now, what happened was, by the time they brought Richard Lester in to direct Superman 2, over 50, I think they said over maybe about 60 or 70% of Superman 2 had already been shot by director Richard Donner. So, of course, Richard Lester came in and reworked some things in the script. He changed a lot of the script around. So that's why we have two different versions of the movie now. So what happened was, I believe in 2005, 2006, fans kind of got into uproar about the whole Richard Donner cut and wanted to see Superman as Richard Donner filmed it and directed it. So some producers got together and they produced the Richard Donner cut of Superman. Now, this particular cut of Superman shows some of the screen tests are in the actual movie from the actors, some of Margot Kidder stuff, some of Christopher Reeve stuff. So, and there's some vast differences between these two cuts of the movie. So let's talk about that a little bit. Now, the biggest difference between the movie, or the biggest supposed difference between the two cuts of the movie, is that the Richard Donner cut is supposed to be more epic or more on this grand scale than what the direction they took the actual movie of Superman 2 in. So it's supposed to be more epic. Now, that's one of the biggest differences between it, or at least the claimed differences between it. So in my opinion, I actually, and people ask me this all the time, as much as I love Richard Donner, I love what he did with Superman 1, and I actually thoroughly enjoy the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2. But when you ask me which one I prefer, I actually prefer the regular Superman 2 version of Richard Lester. I don't know why. It seems like there was some real campiness to the storyline in Richard Donner's cut to this movie. Just a bunch of things that happened, like when Lois actually tried to, shoot Superman with the gun, or shoot Clark Kent with the gun to prove that he was Superman, and then she fools him and tells him it's blanks in the gun. It's like, this is Superman. Like, Superman wouldn't know he didn't get shot. Like, it's just crazy. So anyway, there are some plot holes in that storyline. So I actually prefer the movie that we saw in the theater, the Richard Lester cut of Superman 2. Now let's talk about some of the greatest things about this movie. And by far the greatest thing about Superman 2 are the three supervillains: General Zod, Ursa, and None. Now, these three supervillains, as you know, most of you have probably seen Man of Steel by now, so you probably know a little bit of the story. So Man of Steel was actually a play off this story of General Zod, Ursa, and None. Now, let me dive into this too. There's a difference between Ursa and Faora. Now, Ursa didn't even appear in the comic books of Superman until, I believe, around 2005 or 2006. Faora is the actual female villainess and the character that was associated with Zod. Faora in the comics was a bit different than what she was in the actual movie Man of Steel. I think she was a telepath and all of this kind of stuff, and she hated men, and she used to lure men to her house and, you know, kill them and all this kind of crazy stuff. Ursa, on the other hand, I believe at one point was General Zod's love interest, or they were together romantically in some kind of way, and I think it lasted briefly or something like that. So that's the biggest two differences between these two characters, and I know a lot of people confuse the two because they think that Ursa and Faora is one and the same. In a lot of ways, they are the same, so it's understandable that they can be confused like that, but those are the differences between the two characters. Now, I gotta say, too, this movie is where we get our coolest line from any comic book movie that has been out to date, like the line of "kneel before Zod" that General Zod says. I mean, people go around and say that now, and they don't even know where it comes from, but people just say it, you know, randomly, like, you know, they know where the movie comes from. But it actually originated from this movie. It, you know, we all know the scene. Everybody's seen Superman 2, but there's a scene in there where basically General Zod is this power-hungry guy, and he wants. Again, his motivations in Superman 2 was a bit different than they were in Man of Steel. In Superman 2, his motivations was just that he was a power-hungry guy. He wanted to control. He wanted to be the ruler of everything, and that's what he wanted to do. So that was a way of him. The kneel before Zod was a way of saying that, you know, bow before my feet, worship me, and all of this kind of stuff. So I just got to say that that's like the coolest line that we've gotten from a comic book movie thus far. Kneel before Zod. Now let's talk about some of the major plot things that happened in the movie that was very significant to the movie. Now, one of the major things to me was that Superman actually sacrifices his powers for Lois Lane. So basically what happens, he goes into the Fortress of Solitude. By this time, Lois has found out that Clark Kent is Superman, so basically, Clark goes to the Fortress of Solitude, and his mother, in the original movie, and it's his father, and that's a difference I'll talk about in a minute. But in the original movie, it was actually his mother that says, you know, you can't be Superman and be with a human being romantically. If you're going to be with a human being, you're going to have to become one of them. So, long story short, he sacrifices his powers, and then he goes, you know, they show him and Lois walk off, and supposedly, I guess, they have sex or whatever. So that was one of the biggest things in the movie, and it's funny because some friends and I used to joke all the time about superheroes and their women. And it's always, if you notice, it's always a woman that makes the superheroes do something crazy in the movie. It's always a turning point that's dealing with a woman. Like, you know, Superman sacrifices his powers for Lois Lane, and, you know, all superhero characters that have Spider-Man. I mean, you have even all the Marvel characters. So it's just funny that that's a thing. But that was a major point in that movie and a major turning point in that movie. Now, as I just said, he had supposedly it was hinted that he and Lois Lane had sex in this movie, and I believe that here's a good point too. Going into Superman Returns, I believe that this is what Bryan Singer was trying to play with when he did the whole Superman has a son thing in Superman Returns. I think he was trying to play with the idea that after Clark and Lois at the time in the movie in Superman 2 had sex, that maybe she got pregnant or whatever, and she had a son. And then in Superman Returns, Superman had been gone for 5 years, and, you know, he comes back to Earth and finds out he has a son. So anyway, that's kind of what happened with the whole sex scene. Now, another significant thing that happened in this movie is what I call the magic kiss scene. And it's where basically Superman, after he becomes Superman again and defeats all of the three supervillains, he basically has to go make Lois forget that Clark Kent is actually Superman. So he gives her this magic kiss, and then she forgets that he's Superman. Now, again, that's another important point because that's that happened again in Superman 4: The Quest for Peace, which we'll talk about when we get to that review. But yeah, it was a kind of a play on things because of the way of the Richard Donner cut, the way that they did that. Now it was actually a turn of events. If you remember in Superman 1, where Superman actually flies around the Earth really, really fast and turns back time because, you know, Lois Lane dies. Actually, that scene was filmed for Superman 2. So in the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2, The way that Lois forgets that he's Superman is that basically Superman flies around the Earth and spins it around and spins back time, and none of the stuff actually ever happened where she found out that Clark Kent was Superman. So that's kind of the way that went down. And that's one of the biggest differences between the Richard Donner cut and the Richard Lester cut. Now, another thing I want to talk about, and this is for all of the people who still dislike Man of Steel and hate on Man of Steel and say it's a bad movie, and the movie basically, you know, Superman didn't care about people dying and he destroyed the city and all of that kind of stuff. When you look at it, a comparison of Man of Steel, the movie, and Superman 2, the movie, there was about the same amount of destruction in both movies of the cities being torn up. Now, of course, our 2013 version of Superman, Man of Steel, was a bit more grand than, of course, what would have been in 1980 when Superman 2 was released. But by comparison of the time of 1980, that the destruction that happened in Superman 2 was considered pretty big as well. I mean, basically when Superman and the three supervillains fought in the city for that first time in Metropolis, and you know he shows up, Superman shows up after he becomes Superman again and shows up outside of that window and says, "Excuse me, General, would you care to step outside?" That part, and then they go start fighting in the city and they start tearing up everything. They're throwing buses and cars are flying into buildings, and you know Superman throws General Zod up into this big Coca-Cola sign, and he punches Nunn, and Nunn goes up and knocks this big tower off this building, and Superman goes, catches it. But anyway, again, he punches Nunn when they're fighting underground, and Nunn goes up and flies up through this building and basically destroys his building. So that was a lot of destruction in Superman 2. So, and it wasn't that, of course, that Superman didn't care about human life. I mean, he was in the middle of a fight. He was really in the middle of a fight. And the same thing in the same thing in Man of Steel. This guy's in the middle of a fight with basically a person who has the same powers as he does. It wasn't like Superman was going and, you know, hey, I'm going to stand next to this building so you can hit me into it so I can destroy people or destroy this city. Of course not. It was not like that. And all movies are like that. Like, it's just funny that people complain about the silliest things when it comes to these movies. The Avengers. I mean, the amount of destruction in the city of Avengers was crazy. Transformers, the amount of destruction in there, it's just wild. In all superhero movies, it's like that. So, I mean, and there's a little bit less and there's a little bit more in some movies than others. So, but I mean, by comparison, there was not a lot of destruction or not a lack for the consideration of human life in Man of Steel. So I know that's kind of a rant, but I wanted to say that because people are still going around talking about that. And I'm like, dude, like, really? Okay, now let's talk about some of the deleted scenes in this movie. Again, if you haven't seen a lot of the deleted scenes and a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff of all of the Superman movies, I would encourage you to go out, buy the DVD, buy the Blu-ray. There's a lot of interesting information and a lot of deleted scenes on these movies that's really interesting. Now, there's quite a few in Superman 2, but the two that stick out to me is one where there was a cake baking scene, or I'm sorry, it may have been like I thought it was a cake. Well, let me tell you the story. What happened was, I remember when I was a child, what happened was when they used to play these movies, like all of the Superman movies on TV, on regular TV channels, they would play a lot of times, add a lot of the deleted scenes to these movies. And then there would be commercials and stuff involved with that too. But they would put some of these deleted scenes in these movies. So what happened was, I remember seeing this scene, and then when I got older, I was like, I know I'm not crazy. There was a scene where Superman was using his heat vision to like bake a souffle or bake a cake or something like that in the movie. And then, of course, when the DVD actually came out, or when DVDs, you know, got popular and they released the Superman movies on DVD, they put, you know, the behind-the-scenes stuff on there. So then you saw this movie. So anyway, he does this scene where when he and Lois go to the Fortress of Solitude and they're getting ready to eat. And he uses his heat vision to like bake this cake or souffle or whatever it is. And I thought that was just a really interesting scene. I understand why they took it out. It just adds nothing to the story, but I thought that was an interesting scene. All right, guys, so Superman 2. Again, in my opinion, another perfect movie. A 10 on a scale of 1 to 10, it's a 10 to me. It's, again, some of my earliest memories as a child is sitting down watching Superman 1 and Superman 2 back to back. It's a perfect movie. I think it stood the test of time. Christopher Reeve, magnificent performance again in Superman 2. All of the characters, Gene Hackman, Marlon Brando as the voice of Superman's father. And we'll talk a little bit about Marlon Brando later and why he was taken out of the franchise and all of that kind of stuff. But all of these characters, I mean, it was a well-written movie. It was well-directed. Bravo to Richard Lester for doing a magnificent job on this movie. So I encourage you all, if you have not seen Superman 2, go out and rent it. Try to pick it up on Netflix. Do something. Watch this movie because you'll gain some understanding about what's happening in the Man of Steel universe. And it'll probably answer a few questions about why they did some of the things they did in Man of Steel and some of the things that they're going to do going into the Batman vs. Superman movie. All right, guys, so I'll end the video here. Now, make sure you subscribe to the channel. I'm continuing these reviews of all of the Superman movies from Superman 1, 2, 3, Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, Superman Returns, Man of Steel again, all of these movies, so we'll gain a really, really good understanding about what's happening in this new Batman-Superman universe. So please subscribe to the channel. Follow me on Twitter at this link right here in the video. Go to Twitter right now and log into your account and follow me at this link. And join me next week. I'll be putting up the Superman 3 review next week, where my opinion about where this franchise is going actually kind of changes a little bit. And you'll see where, you'll see why, you'll see how. So again, guys, subscribe to the channel, follow me at the Twitter link, and I'll see you guys in the next video.